Welcome, everyone. I think we will just give it a minute as folks start to trickle in here. But thank you for joining us today. We also go ahead and this. Great, we'll just give it 1 minute for folks to join and then we'll go ahead and get started. Well, we'll go ahead and get started and folks can continue to trickle in. But welcome. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar on exploring Verra's plastic program and plastic credits for regional stakeholders in Africa. A recording of the webinar will be available on the Verra YouTube channel later today, and everyone should get a follow-up email with links to both the presentation and the recording of the webinar. Please submit any questions throughout the presentation that you might have through the Q&A function, and we will have time at the end to address them. Great, let's get started. So we'll just start with introductions. Hi, everyone. I'm Kaylee. I'm a Senior Program Officer for Plastic Policy and Markets here at Verra, and I will let Kristen introduce herself.
Thank you. I'm Kristen Linscott. I'm a manager that works alongside Kaylee on our Plastics Policy and Markets team. And I've been at Verra for about 3 years supporting the plastic program in a variety of capacities.
Awesome. Thank you. Cool. So just to kind of briefly highlight the agenda for today, we'll kind of start with Africa's Plastic Pollution Challenge, and then we'll dive a bit deeper into Verra's plastic program, how to develop a project, some plastic program project examples, and then how to leverage Verra's plastic program and plastic credits, and then briefly touch on the plastic credit market and go into some Q&A. And if you have any follow-up questions, you can always send those to the Plastic Standard email address listed at the bottom of this slide if we don't get to them today. Perfect. So for those who aren't familiar, Verra is the world's leading standard setter for climate action and sustainable development. At present, Verra oversees the world's premier voluntary carbon markets initiative, the Verified Carbon Standard, or VCS program, alongside a comprehensive array of other programs such as the Climate Community and Biodiversity Standard, the Sustainable Development and Verified Impact Standard, and the Plastic Waste Reduction Standard. Verra engages with a variety of governments, corporations, and civil society to address the adoption and responsible use of these standards. There are currently over about 3,000 projects spanning across 85 countries worldwide that use our programs. So the growing problem of plastic waste has become a top priority for many organizations and consumers globally. To begin, we'll dive into the current plastic pollution problem and its impacts in Africa. Over the next decade, an estimated 165 million tons of plastic will reach the end of its life in Africa, exacerbating the region's plastic problem. Currently, only about 4% of the collected waste is recycled, while 90% ends up in uncontrolled dump sites and landfills. Africa hosts 19 of the world's largest dump sites, where plastic waste obstructs waterways and urban drainage systems, contributing to heightened flooding. The continent's plastic pollution profoundly affects not only the environment, but poses severe risk to human well-being. Waste workers are particularly vulnerable in many of these communities. In South Africa alone, there are about 90,000 informal material reclaimers. These reclaimers often work in undignified conditions and are unfairly compensated. Yet they can save municipalities up to about $40 million annually in landfill airspace costs. Many share the concern of funding and financing to implement effective waste management, especially as we near end of negotiations for the Global Plastics Treaty. There's currently about a $40 billion funding gap for waste management in 2040. This does not even include the costs associated with parallel impacts of plastic pollution on our environment. For example, the cost of damage from marine plastic pollution in West Africa alone is estimated to be about $10,000 to $30,000 per ton. These challenges really underscore the necessity to find innovative financial mechanisms to support financing needed for infrastructure development that minimizes plastic pollution. Verra's plastic program is an investment mechanism that can catalyze local plastic waste management efforts. So let's dive into Verra's plastic program. This diagram illustrates some key stakeholders relevant to Verra's plastic program and the resulting plastic credits. So Verra really serves as the standard setter for collection and recycling projects. There's accredited third-party auditors that evaluate conformance with the plastic program requirements and confirm the outcomes of collection and recycling efforts. Subsequently, Verra examines project documentation and audit reports, issuing 1 plastic credit for every ton collected and recycled beyond baseline rates. After plastic credits are issued on the Verra registry, businesses have the opportunity to procure plastic credits, enabling them to make reputable investments in plastic waste management. The credible investment enhances the impact of plastic waste collection and recycling projects. Verra's plastic program offers organizations the opportunity to enhance plastic stewardship by investing in downstream solutions. The program encompasses the plastic standard and the accompanying methodology of plastic waste collection and recycling. The plastic standard serves as a consistent framework for measuring and monitoring project impacts and integrating social and environmental safeguards. Additionally, within the plastic program, projects have the capacity to generate plastic credits. These credits, certified under the plastic program, are issued to projects that have undergone third-party audits and enable corporates to finance initiatives aimed at establishing and expanding plastic waste collection and recycling infrastructure. Plastic credits serve as an investment mechanism for financing global plastic waste collection and recycling. Each plastic credit represents the collection and/or recycling of 1 additional ton of plastic. These credits bolster waste management efforts by facilitating infrastructure development and expansion. Moreover, they enable projects to enhance worker livelihoods, health, and safety standards while also complementing upstream targets in action. There are 2 types of plastic credits under Verra's plastic program. Waste collection credits. These credits are issued according to the amount of plastic waste collected and properly managed, exceeding what would have otherwise occurred without the plastic program project. Collection credits really enable organizations to invest directly in the collection of plastic waste from the environment and establish systems to prevent further pollution. Waste recycling credits are issued based on the amount of plastic waste recycled, surpassing what would have happened without a plastic program project. Recycling credits help facilitate the scaling of recycling infrastructure and the generation of recycled plastic feedstock that can substitute virgin plastic. Some key features of Verra's plastic program include the additionality requirement, which ensures that the project activity demonstrates the collection or recycling of plastic waste beyond what would have likely occurred without that activity. The incorporation of social and environmental safeguards, which necessitates project proponents to confirm the absence of adverse impacts on the natural environment or local communities, including the informal waste workers. An independent third-party verification, which ensures compliance with all project standard requirements. The program covers all 7 types of plastic and composite materials containing plastic. Moreover, a variety of project activities under Verra's plastic standard could include, but aren't limited to, recovery of ocean-bound plastic, development of municipal or private waste collection infrastructure, collection of collection of material through the informal sector, and the operation of mechanical recycling facilities. I will pass it now to Kristen to talk more about the process for developing a project under Verra's plastic program.
Thanks, Kaylee. And today's webinar is meant to really be a high-level introduction and primer to the plastic program, especially for those stakeholders based in Africa. So this next section, I will give a high-level overview of the project development process, But if you are interested in digging in deeper, I would recommend you visit our website. We'll point you to a few locations you can go where you can get even more detail on the process at hand. But to start out, I did want to just summarize the overarching process that a project goes through to register with Verra's program. It all starts when a project, we refer to those who start a project as project proponents. So the project proponent would complete a project description and develop this to show how what they're doing, their activities, whether that be collection or recycling, is designed to meet the plastic standard and relevant methodology requirements. And once they've developed that plastic project description, they'll list their project on Verra's registry, initiating a 30-day public consultation period, and then presenting all of their draft documents for those interested to view on the Verra registry. The next step is for the project to be validated. This is where they arrange for the validation audit by an approved validation and verification body, or VVB. This is the assessment where a third-party auditor will come in and assess how the project is designed to conform with the relevant plastic program requirements. After this, once the project has their final project description as well as validation report, they're able to request registration from Verra. At this point in time, we do a review of the submitted documents, and assuming the project is successfully approved, the project would be considered registered. And once a project is registered, they're able to begin monitoring their activities. Monitoring encompasses the stage where a project actually quantifies the plastic waste that's been collected or recycled for a given period. And this information is summarized in a monitoring report that they prepare. Similar to the previous stage, they will undergo a third-party assessment. In this case, it will be called a verification, where a VVB will come in to verify the amounts described in that monitoring report and also verify that the project has been implemented as it was designed to meet all of those relevant requirements. And after the project has completed verification, they will request verification approval from Verra. And assuming they receive that, they'll be able to request plastic credits for their activity. Moving on, I did want to just highlight that when we mention approved VVBs or validation and verification bodies, these are the auditors which are tasked with assessing whether a project meets those plastic program requirements. Verra approves those qualified to provide these services under our program. There are currently around 7 approved to provide validation and verification services. And you can see this current list as well as the contact information for each of the VVBs on our website. And that page will be constantly updated as new VVBs are approved. The selection of the VVB will be up to the project proponent. So this is the task of the project proponent to directly contract with the VVB of their choosing. And we also wanted to just familiarize yourself with a few key documents. So over on the left, we've got the outline of, or a few examples of some of the key documents. The plastic program guide is really the source for detailing the registration and issuance process. It outlines everything you need to know as far as documents that need to be submitted, the different stages of the process, etc. The plastic standard and then the 2 relevant methodologies form those plastic program requirements that are directly relevant to projects eligibility. So the plastic standard provides the overarching requirements. This will cover things like social and environmental safeguards, stakeholder consultation, as well as temporal requirements like the project start date. Whereas the methodologies, which are specific to the activity type, will get into the detail of how to monitor and measure a collection and recycling activity. And it will also outline important eligibility criteria, such as the applicability conditions and the steps for demonstrating additionality. Did want to highlight that we have a plastic program definitions document that accompanies all of the documents listed here that can serve as a resource for understanding those. And then the plastic program fee schedule is also a key document of interest for many stakeholders, as this will show you what fees to expect that you'll have to pay to Verra as a part of just our general plastic program fees and maintenance. And we do like to highlight this fee schedule is not inclusive of the validation and verification body costs. Those are separate and will be directly negotiated and determined with the VVB of your choice. Lastly, I wanted to highlight that there are templates that we make available for these different stages. So I've already referenced the project description and the monitoring report. There are templates available on our website that include instructional text to assist in the preparation of these documents. Similarly, the VVBs will use the validation and verification report templates, which just helps to ensure consistent documentation and demonstration of how a project meets the relevant requirements under the plastic program. You can find all of these resources on our website. So if you go to our landing page, which is what is listed here, and click the plastic program details page, on the next slide, it will take you to a more detailed overview with lots of information on the plastic program. If you go to that rules and requirements and methodology section, you'll be able to find the direct links to all of the resources I have just mentioned. And again, this is your best stop for the most comprehensive information on the plastic program, what to expect, what the requirements are, etc. Before I wrap up this section, hopefully some of you might be interested. Maybe there are projects in Africa that you think might be compatible for registering under the plastic program. So I wanted to take a moment to reiterate some of the key eligibility criteria, so you can start thinking about this. And of course, if you have further questions, you can go ahead put them in the Q&A if we're able to address them now, or you can email plasticstandard@verra.org and we'll be able to address them offline. But as Kaylee already introduced, I just want to reiterate, for a project to be eligible, it must be collecting or recycling plastic waste, and a project actually can do both as well. A project could encompass both collection and recycling activities. When we speak of plastic, we are referring to those 7 types of plastic or composite materials that contain plastic. These are the things like beverage cartons or multi-layered packaging, where maybe there's plastic and a paper or aluminum layer as well. And so long as the project can meet all of the relevant plastic program requirements, then they would be eligible to register. I want to take a moment to highlight that activities that reduce the amount of plastic produced are not currently within the scope of the program. And by this, I mean, sometimes people come to us and, with activities such as water refill stations or alternative materials that reduce the reliance on virgin plastic, and wonder if they can get plastic credits for those activities. At this time, the scope of the program is focused on reducing plastic waste through collection and recycling activities rather than the production element side itself. We'll see how our program continues to evolve over time. These activities may become part of an expanded scope in the future, but as of today, collection and recycling is relevant. Additionality is something that Kaylee spoke on, and I wanted to speak to it a little bit more because it is a really key requirement for any project to be able to issue plastic credits. And hopefully I can go ahead and highlight some of these requirements and contextualize it in an African context. For those that aren't familiar, additionality is the idea that the project activity can demonstrate that the collection or recycling activity likely would not have happened in the absence of the project, and that what they are doing is in excess of the baseline scenario. Section 7 of those methodologies that had been referenced previously go into great detail about how a project is to demonstrate additionality, but today I'll highlight some of the key elements to consider. All projects have to start by demonstrating regulatory surplus. This is to show that what they are doing exceeds the current regulations or regulatory compliance scenario. So we don't want projects to register activities that have been directly mandated by someone and that they are doing in response to an existing regulation. Assuming they can demonstrate regulatory surplus, then there are 3 tests that they can use to demonstrate additionality. They do not have to use all 3 of these tests. They apply them in a stepwise approach. So basically, the first one that they are able to pass is what they can proceed with for demonstrating additionality. These 3 tests encompass the positive list, which is a list of defined criteria that either the project meets or doesn't meet. There is the penetration rate, which is where a project has to show that either the collection rate or the recycling capacity, dependent on the type of activity, is below 20% for the material types they're managing in the region that the project activity is operating. Or a project can use the investment analysis, which is where they show that the activity is just not economically or financially attractive by comparing the internal rate of return of the project to a selected benchmark. And before I wrap up this section, on this next slide, I just wanted to highlight a few of those criteria that are on the positive list. This is a summary. I will always say this. Please do refer to the original documents for a more comprehensive detail of the relevant information. But as it's relevant to African countries, please note that collection activities that are located in least developed countries or small island developing states or special underdeveloped zones are considered automatically additional. And recycling activities that are located in low-income countries, rural areas of lower middle income countries, or special underdeveloped zones are also considered additional. And the methodologies elaborate further on where these classifications come from. LDCs and SIDS will be aligned with the United Nations, and the income designations are based on the World Bank's classification of countries. We've given you a bit of a high-level overview of how a project can be developed, but we also wanted to take a minute to highlight some of the projects that are using the plastic program today, especially those located within Africa. Before I get into Africa specific, I do just want to highlight the global breadth of the program to date. So our program was launched about 3 years ago, and today we have over 50 projects listed, which means they are in some stage of the registration process, whether that means they've just registered or they are undergoing that validation or verification. And then there are 14 projects that have completed the registration process, and many of these registered projects have also issued plastic credits. You can see the diversity geographically. There are countries in more developed economies as well as those in developing countries as well. Specifically in Africa today, there are 5 projects that are in the process of registering and 6 projects registered. And we hope that there will be even more projects across Africa that look to the plastic program as one way of helping to finance their collection and recycling activities. For reference and kind of interest in digging deeper, I wanted to highlight the Verra registry, which we've mentioned slightly, but just to reemphasize, this is the central repository for basically all information on projects that are in the process or formally registered with the plastic program. You can find the Verra registry on our website. You can dig into detail on these different projects that have been highlighted on the maps on previous slides. And because projects proponents have to upload all of their documents, you can also review their project descriptions or their validation and verification reports if you want to get a sense of how these projects look in practice or what's required to prepare these required documents. But the fun part is to speak about some specific project examples. So I have 3 today. The first is located in Senegal, and this is the Dakali Plastic Waste Recovery West Africa project. They are focused on abating the proliferation of plastic waste in streets and public places and marine ecosystems local to Senegal. They work with local collectors and recyclers to process the plastic that is collected locally into chips, which can then replace virgin plastic in regional manufacturing. And through this project, they also are enhancing the creation of a household level plastic waste separation system in the region. To date, they have monitored and verified nearly 3,000 tons of collected plastic waste and a little over 4,200 tons of recycled plastic waste. There's also a project in Côte d'Ivoire that works with female waste pickers to collect plastic waste from the local communities. They use this collected plastic waste to produce plastic bricks that are then used to build schools as part of UNICEF's school building initiative. The Conceptos Plasticos, or the WAY project, develops or also puts an emphasis on developing and implementing health and safety programs to address some of the hazards that are inherent to these value chains and to reduce the risks associated with collecting plastic waste for the waste pickers and waste workers that are involved. And through this, they also pay above the regionally prevailing wages for the plastic that is collected, thus creating more reliable income opportunities and improving the livelihoods of the waste pickers involved. And lastly, I wanted to highlight the Asase Foundation project, which is located in Ghana. This project works with women entrepreneurs to build plastic waste collection businesses. They've also worked to set up small recycling plants as social enterprises in the regions that they work. And this allows the collected plastic waste to then be shredded or converted into pellets locally before being further processed. And as part of their greater operations, they work with local municipalities to increase plastic waste collection as well as community engagement surrounding plastic waste management so that local community members know how to sort their waste, how to dispose of it properly, etc. This project Kaylee will speak on a little bit later is also one project that has received some upfront financing through the World Bank's most recent plastic waste reduction linked bond. And to date, they have monitored and verified about 2,200 tons of collected plastic waste and a little over 500 tons of recycled plastic waste. Hopefully you found this interesting, just to give a few different examples of what a project might look like. One thing I always like to emphasize is that we've designed these requirements to provide the overarching framework that we expect of all collection and recycling activities that want to issue credits with our program, but there is still flexibility for these projects to be designed in the way that is the most locally compatible and also appropriate. So we know that project proponents know the regions they work in best, and we hope that they keep that top of mind through their stakeholder consultation, etc., to design collection and recycling activities that best serve the local needs of the areas they are working in. That is it from me. I will pass it back to Kaylee to finish us off with some more details on the plastic program.
Thanks, Kristen. Yeah, so now that we have kind of given an overview of Verra's plastic program and gone through the process of how to develop a project and given some examples of projects in Africa specifically, I wanted to talk a bit about how Verra's plastic program can really support mobilizing finance and closing the funding gap that we need. So earlier I had mentioned this $40 billion funding gap that needs to be addressed to really set up and scale waste management infrastructure. And to close this gap, we're going to have to be innovative in the ways that we think about channeling adequate and sustainable finance. And Verra's plastic program comes in as a proven mechanism that can mobilize finance from a variety of sources to address legacy pollution and control further leakage by establishing these collection and recycling systems. So there are several sources of existing funding, meaning sources from where finance can be unlocked for a range of plastic waste management interventions. Those examples could include private sector, public and government sector, and/or development banks or financial institutions. And there are several means for channeling these funds, whether it's through outcomes-based bonds, multilateral funds, the Global Plastic Pollution Fee, EPR, and/or voluntary contributions. And Verra's plastic program really serves as a link between the sources of finance, implementation approaches, and high-quality plastic waste collection and recycling projects, because it can be integrated into a variety of financing methods. So we're going to talk a little bit about how. And I'm sure many of you are familiar with the international legally binding instrument to end plastic pollution, or the Global Plastics Treaty. And if not, this instrument is expected to include both binding and voluntary approaches to addressing the full life cycle of plastics. Additionally, there are many conversations as we speak about how member states are going to finance these possible core obligations that will be outlined in the treaty. This is actually one of the topics being discussed during the intersessional work at the end of next month. And Verra's plastic program and plastic credits can really be leveraged to meet these various proposed core obligations. So for example, driving finance to projects that improve recycling systems and increase the availability of recycled feedstock, by mobilizing private and public sector investments to establish and scale up waste management systems, particularly in vulnerable geographies, mandating social safeguards to support fair and equitable compensation and preventative health and safety practices that enable a just transition, and then supporting EPR schemes at various levels of maturity to enhance the effectiveness in monitoring and verifying protocols and social and environmental safeguards. Another one is the recently announced plastic waste reduction linked bond that will leverage plastic credits issued by Verra to provide returns to bond investors. And this bond supports two projects, one in Ghana and another in Indonesia, Currently, the Asase Foundation project in Ghana is registered with Verra's plastic program, and the Sea Circular project in Indonesia is in the process of being registered. So around $14.5 million in interest that would traditionally be anticipated by the bond investors has been routed to the projects in the form of upfront financing. And under this innovative approach, the bond investors will receive interest linked to the sale of plastic credits the projects generate instead. The credibility of Verra's plastic program and the robustness of its requirements really provide confidence to a broad range of investors who want to support plastic waste management in their key regions. Another example is EPR. So we just talked about how plastic credits can support many objectives being discussed within the Global Plastics Treaty, but concurrently, national governments are implementing a variety of voluntary and regulatory measures to meet their specific plastic waste management goals. And a common example of this is Extended Producer Responsibility Systems, or EPR. EPR is a producer-focused mechanism that makes waste producers responsible for recycling and safely disposing of the waste they generate through products and packaging. So in Africa, there are several existing and emerging EPR schemes in countries such as Egypt, Kenya, Mauritius, Nigeria, and South Africa. However, developing, enforcing, and implementing EPR can be challenging, particularly when resources are limited. So Verra's plastic program and plastic credits can really play a crucial role in supporting these EPR schemes. For example, governments can incorporate plastic credits into their national EPR schemes, providing a flexible compliance pathway for obligated parties while easing the administrative burden on the government. Projects under Verra's plastic program could receive funding from EPR schemes, with producer responsibility organizations confident that these projects are vetted, adhere to a global measurement framework, and really follow rigorous social and environmental safeguards that benefit the local community. And then Verra's plastic program can also serve as a monitoring and verification framework, ensuring that projects financed through the EPR scheme are effectively tracking their impact. And as regulatory measures continue to evolve, voluntary contributions remain a key way for organizations to finance projects aimed at reducing plastic pollution. And these contributions are crucial for making immediate impact while these global and regional policies are being developed. By purchasing plastic credits, companies can take proactive steps to address their plastic footprint. And this approach really allows them to measure the impact of their investments while supporting the development and scaling of infrastructure needed to increase the availability of recycled content, which then allows them to meet recycled content goals. Additionally, it really helps reduce that internal due diligence required for vetting investments. And so we touched on kind of the benefits of corporates investing in plastic waste management infrastructure and activities through plastic credits. But I want to touch on a bit about how companies can use these plastic credits in their corporate plastic stewardship strategy. So corporate plastic stewardship entails an integrated strategy that involves both upstream and downstream activities that aim to reduce plastic use and leakage. And an integrated approach to corporate plastic stewardship begins with measuring or quantifying the use of plastic across the organization's value chain, as well as assessing how much leaks into the environment. Once the plastic footprint and leakage are known and understood by the organization, they can then focus on reducing and managing the organization's plastic waste and leakage. Lastly, the corporation should clearly and transparently communicate about its plastic footprint, reduction in management efforts, and any investments being made into waste management activities. And I want to take a minute just to narrow in on the reduction in management pieces of the corporate plastic stewardship strategy for a moment. Reduction strategies include things like eliminating unnecessary plastic, redesigning products and packaging for reuse or recycling, and increasing the incorporation of recycled content. Management activities involve financing the plastic waste collection and recycling infrastructure to ensure proper waste management at the end of its life. The two activities should really happen in parallel to address both upstream and downstream contributors to plastic pollution. And why is this important? Well, a company could do everything within its control to redesign products and packaging for recycling, but ultimately, if the waste management infrastructure does not exist beyond their value chain to effectively recycle those products and packaging, they're still going to end up as pollution. Similarly, without proper end-of-life waste management infrastructure, companies may not have access to the amount of recycled content feedstock they need to incorporate into their products and packaging. And so through the integration of plastic credits within a corporate stewardship strategy, a corporation can support and set up scaling of the infrastructure that's needed to increase that recycled content feedstock. They can claim immediate impact, minimize social and environmental risks associated with potential projects, and even use plastic credits to meet EPR compliance where it's applicable. And lastly, before we get into our Q&A, I did just want to quickly touch on the market for plastic credits, kind of to the extent that I can, with Verra being an independent standard setter. So again, Verra is an independent standard setter and is not engaged in the sale of plastic credits. Project proponents are responsible for selling their credits, which can be done in a variety of different ways, including direct sales to interested buyers, using brokers or intermediaries, or listing them on a marketplace. And we typically see that companies are the ones that purchase these credits to support their plastic stewardship commitments. And on the price of plastic credits, again, Verra does not track the price of plastic credits. However, we do expect the price to vary based on many factors, such as, the location of the project and destinations of the plastic waste, material type and format, project activity, or the social impact of the project. But ultimately, the price will be determined by the market. Great, so that concludes our presentation, and we will go into some Q&A. Just give us maybe a moment to find the Q&A and find some questions to answer for you all.
Wonderful. Yeah, I can lead us off. We've gotten a good handful of questions, so we'll see how many we're able to answer in the next 5 to 10 minutes or so. I did already leave a note in the chat. If for some reason we don't answer your question or we're not able to get to it today, please do answer or email plasticstandard@verra.org. This is especially good if you have a really specific question that is maybe relevant to a specific scenario. It's probably best answered that way, and we will happy to do it that way. Kaylee, I might start with just two questions that you that relate to what you were just talking about. One person asked about that price range for plastic credits, and so could you just refresh us on that element?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, I think Verra does not necessarily track the price of plastic credits. Again, we're not involved in the pricing, the selling of any plastic credits. And I think the range is very broad from what we see. And so it's really hard to kind of put like a number on that price range. But again, the price will vary depending on a variety of factors that I had mentioned kind of on the previous slide around geography, material type, activity type, whatever the local context is of where the project is operating. But again, that price will be determined kind of by the market.
Wonderful, thank you. And I see a handful of kind of project specific questions or project development specific questions. So maybe we can tag team those. I can start out by answering. One person asked about kind of what opportunities for upfront financing there are if a project is interested in registering or starting a plastic waste collection or recycling activity. With the way Verra's process works, credits are only issued based on activities that have occurred. So in that case, the project needs to have started to be able to generate those plastic credits. In terms of accessing upfront financing, there are a few options. Sometimes projects identify partners that they're able to work with to establish agreements where, somebody helps them with the upfront financing, with the anticipation that the project will then register and issue plastic credits. That's just one of a few ways a project may get upfront financing, but that would be up to the project itself. And then there was one other question I wanted to touch on if I can find it. Or actually, Kaylee, I might actually have you answer. Always a popular one. A few people wanted to know how long to expect for the project registration to issuance process.
Yeah, definitely. So the time to develop a project and issue plastic credits will depend again on a variety of factors. Generally speaking, I think we can estimate roughly it could take between 9 to 18 months. But again, it varies project to project. This timeline could be affected by a variety of things, such as the quality and complexity of project documents, the time needed by the VVB to validate and verify the project, the time required to address any findings raised by the VVB during that validation and or verification, and then the time required to address any findings raised by Verra. But you can expect that Verra tries to meet the review timelines that are set out in our plastic program guide, which can be found on our website, specifically in section 5.7.
Thank you. I'm gonna now take a moment to answer a few project eligibility specific questions. One person asked, does it mean that if a project is financially unviable, then the penetration rate test is not required? So to answer this, I would just reiterate that it is a stepwise approach. So if the project is not able to show that the penetration rate is less than 20%, maybe it's challenging to find the data for this specific material type that they manage, then they could proceed to just using the investment analysis to show that the project is financially unviable or not viable. And in that case, they can forego the penetration rate, the use of the penetration rate test. Another person asked a great question, which is a little specific, but I think offers an opportunity for me to just touch on an element to think about in terms of eligibility. Somebody asked if the country currently has an LDC status, but is going to be graduated from LDC status within the crediting period, would it be additional considering the current LDC status? I would recommend this person reach out to us specifically to discuss the scenario, but I do want to say that more broadly, project eligibility and additionality is assessed at the project start date. So a crediting period could be anywhere from 7 to 10 years long, and we understand that a project might not know for sure what the graduation trajectory of like a LDC status might look like or what changes may occur over the crediting period. What we expect of them is to show what the scenario is at the time of the project start date, and then to demonstrate how they are meeting those requirements at that point in time. I think I saw one for you, Kaylee. Oh, somebody asked, this is a good basic one. Who can register on the Verra registries in terms of like, can it be individuals or is it just companies and institutions?
Yeah, so maybe I can start, and then Kristen, if you have anything to add. But the Verra registry is kind of the source for assessing the status of projects and availability of plastic credits issued under the plastic program, and anyone can access it. It's a publicly available registry online, so you can go on there and look at all the different tabs that explain where in the process different projects are, or list out the plastic credits that have been issued and retired under Verra's plastic program. But I think as far as, opening an account, there is, again, an overview page on our website that could be helpful in providing some resources on how to go about that inside of our Verra registry user guide. But typically I think it would be for folks looking to register their or list or register their project activities.
Yeah, great reference to the Verra registry page and the registry user guide. That's a great source of information. Generally, individuals are not eligible to have these registry accounts. It's more commonly organizations, whether for-profits or nonprofits, that are either interested in registering a project or purchasing credits or retiring those plastic credits that are issued by a project. So thank you for that question. Somebody did ask about, I think there was a general question of just seeing like what credits are sold or are available. As we've acknowledged, the registry is not a marketplace per se, so the sale details are not available there, and the financial transaction will happen separate. But what you can see is the amount of credits that have been issued to date that are active and available for purchase, as well as those that have been retired to date. And I would acknowledge that sometimes there is a bit of a lag between the sale and the retirement, depending on when that purchaser plans to retire and make claims against the credits. But that's just another example of where the registry can be a good resource. I think, what do you think, Kaylee? Maybe we'll do one or two more questions. And one that's maybe a good one, and we can tag team, I might let you get started on it though, is a question about what's the advantage of choosing Verra over another accreditation or certification for plastic credits? I know you already touched on some of them, Kaylee, but are there any others you would want to highlight? And then I can round us out as well.
Yeah, so I think that kind of the value that Verra provides is, again, Verra is an independent third-party standard setter. So again, they're not involved in any of the project development processes, and they're not involved in the selling of plastic credits. They really are just writing the standard, making sure that it's used appropriately. And I think that's where like the value comes in, because they're able to like remain independent of all of those things and provide really robust requirements for plastic collection and recycling projects that, go through a very robust process to get certified and then be able to issue plastic credits.
Yeah, and I will just, emphasize a lot of what Kaylee said and just echo and add that the transparency element of the way we operate as a standard setter is very important, and of a key priority for us always. So that's where things like the registry and just the accessibility of all of the documents on our website help to instill market trust and the integrity and credibility of the way we operate. And we do always look to those best practices like the ICL credibility principles to inform the way we operate and make updates to our program. And that is something we haven't touched on today, but The program will be continually improved over time. Continuous improvement is a principle in all of Verra's programs, which means that we will update our requirements to keep up with the latest data, science, and findings surrounding plastic pollution so that it is always current and meeting the needs of the plastic waste collection and recycling projects. And I think the last question I wanted to answer is maybe a little tangentially related. Somebody asked, I assume this person is familiar with the voluntary carbon market. They asked, pardon me, I lost the question. Oh, if there is any market analysis being planned by a third party similar to like ecosystem marketplace in the voluntary carbon market, and they acknowledge just the value that would have. I think at this point in time, our standards have been, it's about 3 years old. So the market is still, developing and maturing. I think we hope and anticipate that there will be resources like this over time. Verra tries to be careful in our own participation of developing these kind of analyses because we don't want to create any conflicts of interest or speculate on the market in which, we're operating in as an independent standard setter. But we hope that there will be analyses of the like in the coming years, and we will help contribute to those as appropriate if there are organizations that are putting them together. That I think is about it, unless Kaylee, I'm not sure. Do you see any other questions that I missed and you wanted to touch on?
I think that is good, and we can just wrap here.
Awesome.
There's again our contact information on this last slide. So if there are any questions that didn't get answered, please feel free to email the plasticstandard@verra.org email, or again, our website has a whole host of resources on the variety of different things that we touched on today, and is a great place to find that. But thank you all for joining.
Thank you.